So today we got a question from The Shadow 1928, and he asks, what are Psy good for anyway? Like, are they for competition or what? And that's actually an excellent question. This is an implement that has a bit of a unique shape, and we don't see it floating around in modern day either forces or just casually carrying it around. So generally you don't see this tucked into someone's belt in everyday life. So what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about where this implement came from, what it was good for, and what it actually can be good for even today. So a lot of the mythology in regards to this item is based out of Okinawa Prefecture of Japan. And the mythology of a lot of Okinawan Kobudo is that it came out of agricultural implements. That's true in some cases, and in some cases it's not true. So for this, a lot of the story goes that the yoku side prongs here were used to measure the distance between seeds as they were planting rice or whatever other crops. Another story goes that this was actually used as an ox cart pin, so where the ox and the cart came together, this would hold it together. But in fact, as you dig down more in your research, you'll find that a lot of these histories were put in place just to bring that agricultural story together. It doesn't really hold up so much. So historically speaking, this was probably less of an agricultural tool and more of a matter of importing the concept from China and some of the other Asian cultures surrounding the area. So we see the development of the Sai and the Jute in Japan based around that. And in fact, this implement was seen more by the policing class, the Peichin class of Okinawa, who were in charge of keeping the populace under control, arresting rogues, bandits, things like that. And the implementation and use of this weapon holds up with that. So you'll notice the monouchi here is not bladed, it's rounded. And also the yoku here are used for trapping and controlling. So you could ensnare clothing, you could ensnare weapons of any variety, and you could pin to the ground and pin arms together, and just very good at restraining and controlling. If it was more for directly killing, you'd probably see more bladedness, a much sharper point on the edge. With this weapon, we can flip it, and we can use it folded in this way defensively, or we can flip it out and use it offensively or for restraining and things like that. Another fact to back up that aspect is that steel was actually rather rare in Okinawa. So this would have been an expensive implement, and only the middle to higher classes would have had it available to them. So your average Okinawan peasantry farmer would have been using the small amount of steel they had on hoes and things of that nature, as opposed to an implement like this. Now that's not to say none of them had it, of course, but you saw it more for the police agencies. Now, for modern day, where does this come into play? Of course you see it in tournaments and in traditional dojo, and part of that is simply keeping culture alive. So this was part of the Karate Kobudo experience, so we continue to keep it alive today. However, the concepts used in order to properly manipulate a long-pronged weapon here, even with side objects, can be transferred into some modern-day objects. And I'd like to show you that right now. So I trolled through the area and I simply picked up a couple of items that could possibly transfer concept. So we're talking about self-defense now at this point. So obviously you might not have this handy, but who knows what you might have handy both in the home and out and about. So let's just take a couple look at some of these. First is, this is your standard Maglite. Now you'll notice that it does not have any catching implements here on the side, but it does have a long, straight, metallic thrusting or striking point this way. So the same blocking concepts that you use for your side can still be used with this flashlight. And the same can be true of smaller, faster implements, and this is simply a long screwdriver. So this is particularly effective at thrusting vital positions, the eyes, the throat, anything that you might have. So you're using body position to get out of the way of attacks and then thrusting in, just like you would with the sai. And while you're in your toolbox, the same can be true of the hammer. The hammer has some gripping and pulling the same way as a folded-in sai might. And you can even fold it in this way if you need to, although let's face it, you have a hammer, so you want to use it out like that. Now if you want to stretch the imagination a little bit, this is a little bit of a hair dryer, straightener, but the same thrusting and blocking can be used. And if you really want to insult your opponent, you can use something like this, which is a toilet brush. Hey, if it's handy. So I hope that demonstrating some of these things shows you why Psy can transfer into modern day and why it also preserves some of that culture, which is valuable in and of itself. Thanks for the question.